Okay, hello everyone. My name's Eloisa Ramos, and we are here to study A Course in Miracles. We're studying the text, and I am joined by my daughter Sonia. Hi, Sonia.
Hi.
And my friend Lori. Hi, Lori.
Hi.
And Connie, who will have her video on in a little bit, but she's listening in. Okay, so we left off in chapter 9, which is the acceptance of the atonement. And it is number 7, the 2 evaluations. Okay, so I'll just take one paragraph at a time here. So let's see. Number 1, God's will is your salvation. Would he not have given you the means to find it? If he wills you to have it, he must have made it possible and easy to obtain it. Your brothers are everywhere. You do not have to seek far for salvation. Every minute and every second gives you a chance to save yourself. Do not lose these chances, not because they will not return, but because delay of joy is needless. God wills you perfect happiness now. Is it possible that this is not also your will? And is it possible that this is not also the will of your brothers? Okay, so I think this is picking up from the previous paragraph, which was the acceptance of your brother, because it's talking about salvation and about our brothers. And basically, the means for salvation is everywhere. Number 4, your brothers are everywhere. So you do not have to seek far for salvation. So that means our brothers are our salvation. And let's see. Okay. And therefore, when we don't accept our brothers, we are delaying joy needlessly. So let's see. And the salvation, that's interesting, because we talk about salvation of the world, but here it says that salvation is number 6. Every minute and every second gives you a chance to save yourself. And I guess that's because the world is really a projection of what we think we are. And so saving the world would be that salvation of what we think we are, because it's not real. What we think we are is not what we are. It's how God created us. So once we see that in our brothers, that our brothers are exactly as God created them, we will have that reflected back to us as what the truth is, which would be our salvation and the restoration of our joy. Okay. So anything else there? Anything that's not clear, or any comments? No? All right. So number 2, Sonia.
Consider then that in this joint will, you are all united, and in this only. There may be disagreement on anything else, but not on this. This, then, is where peace abides. And you abide in peace when you so decide. Yet you cannot abide in peace unless you accept the atonement, because the atonement is the way to peace. The reason is very simple and so obvious that it is often overlooked. The ego is afraid of the obvious, since the obviousness is the essential characteristic of reality. Yet you cannot overlook it unless you are not looking.
The obvious is very cryptic sometimes, or at least it appears that way.
Well, that's because we make everything so complicated. I make everything so complicated always, all the time.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's right in front of your face. It's like looking in the fridge, I try to find the mayonnaise or something and I can't find it. And it's right there. in front of my face.
I like to play a game with myself when something happens. It's like I can't figure this out, or I feel like somebody else is playing a trick on me. I go like, okay, Jesus, is this a trick? Where did you put that? Are you hiding things purposely from me? And then I laugh, and I just kind of gets me in that, looking at things differently. It's like, okay, don't judge this. Don't try and control this situation. Sometimes just walk away from it and things will show up, or I'll start doing something else and the problem seems to solve itself.
Yeah. Yep. That's right. So that's a change in perception, Lori. That's the miracle.
Yes.
And
miracles are naturally occurring.
Exactly. So Sonia, with the paragraph in line 1, this joint will, you are united, and in this only. And so what's the joint will here?
I'm sorry, where are you?
Just the paragraph that Sonia just read. I just want to make sure that it's clear that it says, consider then that in this joint will you are united, and in this only, because it's talking about the previous paragraph.
Well, this is the one will, God's will.
And what is that?
That we are of one mind, in love, in joy.
Yeah, it's line 8, right in the first paragraph. God wills you perfect happiness now. Right. And so, yeah. And so it's saying, look, we may disagree with our brothers or whatever on just about anything else, but not on this. We all want happiness. Yeah. So, and then, it talks about peace. You cannot abide in peace unless you accept the atonement, because atonement is the way to peace. And what is atonement, just for review?
The correction of the belief in separation that essentially never happened.
That's right. And so therefore it's the recognition that my brother is one with me, not separate from me. The same with God. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay, and that's very simple, but we overlook it. Just like the mayonnaise, it's in front of our eyes.
The mayonnaise.
Right next to the butter.
Right next to the butter. And they're the same. That's why we can't distinguish them. Okay, number 3. Do you want to read, Connie?
Okie dokie. It is perfectly obvious that if the Holy Spirit looks with love on all he perceives, he looks with love on you. His evaluation of you is based on his knowledge of what you are, and so he evaluates you truly. And this evaluation must be in your mind because he is. The ego is also in your mind because you have accepted it there. Its evaluation of you, however, is the exact opposite of the Holy Spirit's, because the ego does not love you. It is unaware of what you are and wholly mistrustful of everything it perceives because its perceptions are so shifting. The ego is therefore capable of suspiciousness at best and viciousness at worst. That is its range. It cannot exceed it because of its uncertainty, and it can never go beyond it because it can never be certain.
Okay. Okay, no comments on that, Connie? No? Okay. All right. So, okay, so this basically sums up the 2 thought systems in our mind. The Holy Spirit, the thoughts of God, and the Holy Spirit looks with love on all he perceives. including, ourselves. So the part of our mind that is the right mind only sees love. And therefore, the evaluation of ourself is that we are loving. We are loved, lovable, loving. Okay. But the ego, which is also in our mind, because we have accepted it there, well, it has the same, it's also evaluative, but it's the opposite of the Holy Spirit. So it's going to basically say that we are not lovable, we are not loving. And the best that we can think of ourselves when we identify with the ego is that we are untrusting and at worst vicious. So so that's basically the ego. And when we identify with the ego, we're going to have these ideas about ourselves because that's what we've accepted into our mind. And number 10, it can never go beyond it because it can never be certain. So the thing about the ego thought system, which is false perception, is that it's based on fear. And it's based on instability and, impermanence. So everything is uncertain because it's always changing. So it does, yeah, Lori?
Oh, I was just going to say that line 6, it is unaware of what we truly are. So the
Yeah.
only thing it can make is fear-based.
Yes, because it does not know love. Yeah,
Doesn't know love.
that's
And
right.
I keep thinking that, oh, of course, the ego's got to know what love is.
Well, a special love.
It's a misconception, but it's one that we grew up with, all this time, looking for love in all the wrong places.
Yeah, because, it
Totally
confuses love.
unaware.
Yeah, it does use the word love, but it confuses it with specialness or, with
Yeah.
other things. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay. All right. Do you want to read, Lori, number 4?
You then have 2 conflicting evaluations of yourself in your mind, and they cannot both be true. You do not yet realize how completely different these evaluations are, because you do not understand how lofty the Holy Spirit's perception of you really is. He is not deceived by anything you do, because he never forgets what you are. The ego is deceived by everything you do, especially when you respond to the Holy Spirit, because at such times its confusion increases. The ego is, therefore, particularly likely to attack you when you react lovingly, because it has evaluated you as unloving and you are going against its judgment. The ego will attack your motives as soon as they become clearly out of accord with its perception of you. This is when it will shift abruptly from suspiciousness to viciousness, since its uncertainty is increased. Yet it is surely pointless to attack in return. What can this mean except that you are agreeing with the ego's evaluation of what you are? Are you there?
Yeah. Do you
Oh,
want to say
sorry.
what's coming through for you with that?
Well, I see how the ego's almost, and I've noticed this a lot lately, living down here in Florida in what I consider a much more conservative environment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I see the ego, how it baits me, how it wants to try and trick me into thinking, into disagreeing, into judging, thinking like that's not fair. That's not the way you should see things or perceive things. How can you live with people who seem so completely different from myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I consider myself to be someone who's pretty open-minded, but I'm not taking the bait nearly so much as I used to. As I really get that what the ego is presenting to me is totally false
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and has no basis of love.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a really kind of an anatomy of what the ego does, the ego mind presents. And when I see those thoughts, those ego thoughts that can be vicious thinking or um, confusion, that's another one that's come up for me. It's like
Yeah.
um, to just kind of let them go, just sort of be aware that they're there, but don't latch onto it.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And some days are a lot easier than others. With
Yeah, and you know the good indicator is the peace, the inner peace that it was talking about in the previous, I think it's in the previous in the paragraph 2. Yes, number 5, you cannot abide in peace unless you accept the atonement, because the atonement is the way to peace. So once you recognize that, irregardless of you know what people believe or how they see things or what position they take in, you know, in politics or in whatever issue is out there, once you recognize that their true self is not any of that, and that we are the same in our essential created self, that is uh, that is a holy creation by God and only loving, it makes it a lot easier to not take the bait, like you were saying, Lori, because you're remembering
Mhm.
that essentially they're not really different. We're the same. We can have very extreme points of view, but that doesn't change the fact that we're created the same and therefore have to be the same, essentially. So yeah, so that's a really good reminder. Okay, all right, number 4. Um,
Uh,
you then have oh, that's which one, the
right.
one you read, number 5. If you choose to see yourself as unloving, you will not be happy. You are condemning yourself and must therefore regard yourself as inadequate. Would you look to the ego to help you escape from a sense of inadequacy it has produced and must maintain for its existence? Can you escape from its evaluation of you by using its methods for keeping this picture intact? Okay. So of course the answer is no, because those are contradictions. So condemning ourselves is a way of looking at ourselves through the eyes of the ego as unloving and seeing error as sin, um, and therefore we would be regarding ourselves as inadequate because we would be forgetting the perfection of how God created us. Um, and you know, and if the ego is the one that's telling us we are inadequate, how can we look to the ego to escape from that? We can't. Um, so we have to be able to let go of that picture that the ego is presenting to be able to escape from the inadequacy that we feel. Okay. All right, number 6, Sonia.
You cannot evaluate an insane belief system from within it. Its range precludes this. You can only go beyond it, look back from a point where sanity exists and see the contrast. Only by this contrast can insanity be judged as insane. With the grandeur of God in you, you have chosen to be little and to lament your littleness. within the system that dictated this choice, the lament is inevitable. Your littleness is taken for granted there, and you do not ask who granted it. The question is meaningless within the ego's thought system, because it would open the whole thought system to question.
Mm. Anything, Sonia? What's it saying?
Well, it's saying that you can't fix the problem within the system that made the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, and I think for me, it's really telling me that I chose to accept the ego system and lament my littleness. So that's kind of like, oh, poor me, I'm a victim, I can't do anything, and not, and within that frame of mind, I can't ever see it as unreal if I don't recognize it as not true. That's what I get from it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah, so line 7, your littleness is taken for granted, therefore you do not ask who granted it. In other words, we just assume it's true. We don't question it. We don't question it. So, and if we did question it, it's like, well, okay, who says so? Then that would begin to really open up the whole ego thought system to question, and it would begin to unravel. So there's a lot of investment in protecting the ego thought system by believing that, yeah, that we are little, that we are limited, that, mm, by feeling, you could say, powerless and helpless, because of the insanity that we see, and then to believe that that we are within it is basically that sense of helplessness and powerlessness.
Can I share something
Yes. Mm-hmm.
about the hurricane?
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, sometimes tears and emotions come up, so just let that be. It's like rain. It's like
Oh,
relieving for me. So
sure. Yeah.
I noticed that when the hurricane was coming, I couldn't decide. I was confused as to where to go, what to do. And then the day before, my realtor, who I had put a contract on a house in North Fort Myers, had been accepted the contract, but she said, why don't you come and stay with me during the hurricane? And so I did, and it was a very safe, well-built brick and mortar home. But I still was so concerned about, my house that I was renting, the house that I was going to buy, my car. And I didn't know at that point, up until I had that conversation with her, what it was going to be like. And my ego mind, up to a certain point, was just going nuts. And then I just, all of a sudden, I turned to Jesus and I said, I just need to know that everything's going to be okay. And I reached a point where it was like total peace. I became totally accepting of whatever happened was going to happen. I was going to be all right, whether I lived or died. I preferred living at that point, but I was really got to see how everybody at that point, when the whole external reality is being threatened, people really come together. And a lot of disasters do that at the time. And then during the hurricane, it was just like whew, so many different stories, but people did whatever they did to help each other and to be one with each other. But then at the days afterward, as things started being surveyed and seeing what damage was done, you really got to see how the ego mind stepped in and started analyzing and judging and saying, oh, I could have done more, or I didn't do enough, or these people are special. They did all the work. They, so the whole analogy of the ego, so to speak, kind of unfolded through the whole 3-4 days to a week to 10 days after the hurricane. And I was just so thankful that I have studied this course for so many years, because I could actually stay in a place of totally letting go of my judgments of how it should all look. And that just allowed this tremendous peace to just be there. And I still notice, I don't talk about it to too many people, especially people, except people that were here. I still notice I have this charge because I'm around, I see all the physical damage that it did. So there's a sadness there, but there's just, there was just a tremendous shift for me and letting go of judgment. And yeah, I think that I hear that voice in my head sometimes, and I'm just like, that's not who we are. That's not who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, thanks for listening. But
Yeah, thank you, Lori. Yeah.
it's
That
been a
was
tremendous experience and
yes, it
an
was.
ongoing process. Um, and it has changed me too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it's continuing to keep choosing that place of peace and joy. You can
Yes.
be standing around everything destroyed around you, but as long as there's one other person there to just be with, it's just joy. That's where the joy and the happiness are experienced.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's in sharing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Connie?
Well, it's something I noticed. Yeah, so I'm wondering what happened. Okay, at the point when it was going to happen, people knew everybody was coming together in a beautiful way. And yes, I noticed that too with things like that. And then when it's over, everybody's getting back into their stuff. What happens there? I mean, we're all coming together in that moment in a loving way. What is that? And then, I mean, why is that? Is that the fear or what that's allowing us to just come together, but then to change so suddenly once the storm has passed, then we get into our little minutia egoic stuff.
Hmm.
It's just,
Whoops.
Yeah. Did you want to answer that, Lori, or
Yeah, the
anything?
thing when I was in the storm, the thing is there was no lack. There was no need. I was just there. It was like, and that was but after the storm, when we started looking at all the damage and we didn't know what we're coming home to or coming back to, that's when the fear and survival mechanism really kicked back in for a lot of people. It was like when we were in something together, we were together and we do whatever it takes. I think that line of our littleness is taken, for granted. You become a very big person when you're joined in love. You become very connected. We're connected in our love for one another. But afterward, people start surveying, and they're like, "Oh, I'm here, but this is destroyed, that's destroyed," and
Mhm.
they go into fear, and
Mhm.
then the ego just has its heyday. It's like opening the
Yeah.
box, and people are like, "How am I going to live? How am I going to survive?" And they
Mhm.
want to do it. Then they have to rely. They tend to rely on themselves more because, I mean, there's a well, maybe you can address it too a little bit, Eloise, but
Mhm.
um,
Yeah, so when we all have something, right, that we're going to experience together, okay? And we don't know who's going to make it, who's not going to make it, how it's all going to, you know, it's the same thing in California with the fires, okay? You're asked to evacuate. You don't know if your house is going to be there or not when you come back. Some houses are there, some houses are not there. Well, in that space, there's a recognition, okay, maybe not not completely, you know, maybe even it's just unconscious, but there's a partial recognition there that we're all the same. We're in the same boat here. So there's this sense of equality because irregardless of whether your house is, $5 million or it's, just a little trailer home, okay, the possibility of the loss because it's an unknown is the same. Okay, so the differences in terms of what we tend to associate with the individual self that we perceive, whether it's a difference in, economic status, whether it's a difference in ethnicity or gender, or however it is that we're perceiving differences, those tend to not matter there. So there is a sense of equality, which is very close to recognizing we're all the same, we're all one. Okay. But then once we come back and we start looking at what actually is left, okay, and we see that, oh my God, my neighbor's house did not burn to the ground, but mine did. Okay, what the heck is that? We try to make sense out of it with the ego. Okay, and it cannot be made sense of with the ego. Okay, so we begin to go into the judgment. Okay, this is unfair, God. Why, did I not uh take enough precautions like you were saying, Lori? Did I not cut the grass behind me? Should I have, not left that tall tree there? Whatever. You start trying to um make up answers for why things look the way they look. Some people lost everything, some people lost nothing. And then we see inequality again. And now we start saying, okay, there's a perception of separation here. And then we go into the specialness. Oh, well, God, has chosen ones and he saved those and didn't save us, and that kind of comparison. So now it's all ego. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So we lose that perspective that we had before. So, and that's how it goes, because in the Course in Miracles, that's the mind training. The mind training is, okay, you want to stay vigilant because otherwise we get sucked back right into the survival and the fear and the comparison, and it's all ego. Um, because we become again identified with being a body and trying to protect the body and trying to, keep it alive as long as possible, kind of a thing. Yeah.
I sometimes wonder if that's why we create these disasters, because
Hmm.
it's a way for us to learn to let go, to come together.
Hmm.
Um,
Well,
Um,
yeah, the Holy Spirit can use it definitely for learning and for for teaching the truth. So the Holy Spirit can take anything that the ego makes um, for the purpose of healing the mind. Um, so anything, even disasters like that, mass shootings, any of that can be used for healing if we give it that purpose.
yeah,
So we have to be able to stay in hold on to the peace and stay in our right mind.
trust,
Yeah,
trust, and
trust.
definitely.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Okay, so let's see. Paragraph 7. I think it's
I
Connie's
think it's
turn.
funny, me.
Yeah. Hmm.
I have said that the ego does not know what a real question is. Lack of knowledge of any kind is always associated with unwillingness to know. And this produces a total lack of knowledge simply because knowledge is total. Not to question your littleness, therefore, is to deny all knowledge and keep the ego's whole thought system intact. You cannot retain part of a thought system because it can be questioned only at its foundation. And this must be questioned from beyond it, because within it, its foundation does stand. The Holy Spirit judges against the reality of the ego's thought system merely because he knows its foundation is not true. Therefore, nothing that arises from it means anything. He judges every belief you hold in terms of where it comes from. If it comes from God, he knows it to be true. If it does not, he knows that it is meaningless.
Hmm. Anything, Connie, with that?
Oh, no.
No. Well, the Holy Spirit, that's why the Holy Spirit doesn't judge the thoughts of the ego because this line 10 is that, Holy Spirit knows that all those thoughts are meaningless. So why judge what is meaningless? Um, yeah, so let's see. So the real question is that we have to we have to come to a place where we recognize that the two thought systems are completely incompatible and therefore make a decision to choose love and to make a conscious decision because that's how we that's how our little willingness is demonstrated. Um, and that's how we remember that we have a choice to forgive or not forgive, to choose the grievance or the miracle. Um, and and that's how we can stay kind of centered in in the recognition that we are the decision-making mind. Okay, that we're not the little self that seems to be like a leaf in the wind of change and time and happenings in the world, but that we are the mind that is the causal and the one that is the projector basically for what we see in the world. So we want to recognize the importance that our mind plays in everything that happens as our experience in the world, because it is the causal level. And that's not littleness. That's that's creative power. Whether we choose to use it in miscreate, misuse it, I should say, or use it to co-create, to to recognize that our will and the will of God are the same and that they're loving. So let's see. Yeah, and the foundation here, line 6, the Holy Spirit judges against the reality of the ego thought system merely because he knows its foundation is not true. Yeah, and so that's why the acceptance of the atonement is is really critical, because it undoes that foundation. You know, we are not separate. We can't be separate. We are one creation. So so we have to keep bringing that back into our awareness to be able to stay in a place of peace when there's all this chaos and insanity in the world. Because you know, it's a collective thought system, and either we are supporting it or we are recognizing that it's false, and therefore helping to heal the mind. That is also just one ego mind too. Okay. Anything else there? No.
That's a
Okay.
lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot in recognizing that we are not little. Do you see what I'm saying? Because we have to take the power of the mind seriously. And sometimes that can be fearful in itself. But once you recognize that the mind cannot attack and it's only loving, then that fear can be released, because attack is the same as fear, basically. And yeah, and that would be the ego thought system. And that's not our true mind, because it's not loving, and our true nature is loving. So
It's
yeah,
hard.
that's
Sometimes it's just hard because I find myself wanting to watch the news occasionally, or listen to some politics, which lasts about 2 minutes, and then I'm like, oh, can't do this. So
yeah,
to stay engaged in the quote world through media, social media
yes,
stuff, that can make it very challenging if I, if I
But
can,
you can use that.
hmm
you
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 can.
can
can
use
also
that
use that.
to practice. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's a really good place to practice. See where you're at.
Yes, yes, it is. If you notice what comes up for you. What makes it difficult is that we get invested, we take a side. And
We think it's true, right? We think
yeah,
it's
so
true what's going
yeah.
on.
Well, once we take a side, we're going to make it true because we've judged it. Yeah. So the trick is to be able to watch it and not judge it. So you can be informed about what's going on, but you're not joining the dream. You could say you join your brother, but you are not joining the dream. And that does take practice. That's what the course is. It's it's a daily practice. It's a mind training, because we've trained ourselves to judge and to take sides and to defend and attack. And that's how we survive, because we think we're ego bodies. So now we have to practice on doing all that, because we did a really good job of conditioning ourselves to believe those things. Yeah. Okay,
Mhm.
so number 8, let's see. Whose turn is it? Is it Lori?
Yes.
Okay.
Whenever you question your value, say, God himself is incomplete without me. Remember this when the ego speaks, and you will not hear it. The truth about you is so lofty that nothing unworthy of God is worthy of you. Choose then what you want in these terms and accept nothing that you would not offer to God is wholly fitting for him. You do not want anything else. Return your part to him, and he will give you all of himself in exchange for the return of what belongs to him and renders him complete.
Mhm.
So easy.
Yeah, but it's, it's basically saying return that part that's you split off, which is the split mind. So bring back that part that believes it's separate, bring it back to God, to render him complete, because we're basically rendering ourselves complete. That split off consciousness part that thinks it's on its own, is not really on its own. It just thinks it is. Yeah. So it's about convincing ourselves it's not possible to be on our own. um, and also just, recognizing that the truth about you is so lofty that nothing unworthy of God is worthy of you. So it's really a remembering of our infinite value. And I don't know why that's so hard to accept, because it's almost as if we give value to being incomplete and worthless and valueless. you know?
That's the ego right
Well,
there.
yeah.
And staying confused. I heard my mind say, well, if it's that simple, why don't you do it? And I know that's ego mind going. It's like, well, no, let's make it hard. Let's make it confusing.
Well, yes, and that's what the ego
That's what the ego wants
does.
to
That's what the
survive.
yeah, what it's saying is, Lori, yeah, if you can't do it, if it's hard, then it means I'm right, and God is wrong.
Mhm.
So who are you going to believe?
Well,
Yeah.
that's
Um, and that's where the trust and the faith comes in, because some of the ego can get very tricky, in terms of kind of, knowing where our fears are, right? So it just plays on our fears. But at some point, yeah, at
Mhm.
some point that the ego, the distrust, because that's all the ego is distrust. At some point we get tired of that, because there is so much uncertainty in it. It's like the ego saying, well, trust me, but I'm just offering distrust. Okay.
And you begin to see, I think, as I've gotten older, especially, but just I really see how, I just lost my thought.
It had to do with the
It's
ego and how, it says trust me, but you know.
Yeah, it's like a machine. It's this little machine, and I get tired of it. I've gotten
Mhm.
tired of it, and it's like, yeah, I really don't want this anymore because I see the cost. I see what it's cost me.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, there's a price. Yeah.
It was a
It
steep.
yeah, a steep price. And I mean, it's right here in the first paragraph. God wills only for our perfect happiness. And in the second paragraph, well, the ego is just the opposite of that. And once you really begin to see that that's true, the ego does not have our best intentions in mind here. It makes us very much more decided for what we want to believe.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. And it's also about valuing that inner peace that you spoke about, Lori. Because you know what it really is, it's inner strength. because in those times, that's what we really want, is we really want to have that inner strength that is within, that is unshakable when you are in the middle of a hurricane, you know,
And there's an
and
unconditional love that is there, that's always there, that is can be so profound
Mhm.
that once you experience that, and then it goes away, it's like, wait a minute, I want that back. You know what I
Well, it
mean?
seems like it goes away, right? But it's that
Right.
we have now shifted our attention and are looking at what is not real,
Yeah.
but seems to be real. Yeah.
And then the ego goes, well, let's see if we can't figure out how to get back there. But it's really
Uh,
about asking God, God,
yeah.
ask God through Holy Spirit. It's like, you know, I'm willing. Show me.
Show me. And you know it's there because you've
Yeah.
had the experience of it. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So those are the two evaluations of what we are, the Holy Spirit and the ego, and which one we choose is up to us. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and stop here unless there's any questions. Okay. All right. So thank you for joining.
Thank
And
you.
yes, thank you.